I want to show you something. It's the middle of January. The ground's froze hard enough to ring like a bell, and I'm going out to what's left of the garden to come back with supper. There, that's a parsnip. Been in that froze row since October, and it's sweeter right now than the day it grew. Most folks think a mountain family did all their keeping in the fall. Filled the cellar, filled the jars, and spent it down till spring. That's only half of it. The other half was still alive, still out in the froze ground, still down in the dark, still hung in the crib. 25 vegetables carried these hollers through the worst 4 months of the year, and near about half of them you can't buy in any store today. Here's the twist. Number 21 stands out in the snow all winter, and you dig it green. Number 12 is sweet as candy after a hard frost, and its wild cousin is the deadliest plant on this continent. And number 1 is a squash these mountains near about lost for good. Let's count down the 25 forgotten vegetables Appalachian families grew to survive the winter. Number 25, the rutabaga, the Swede. Ma called it the Swede. It's not a turnip, though it favors one. Bigger, yellow to the middle, sweeter, and it keeps about 3 times as long. You sow it in July, 90 days ahead of your first hard frost, and leave it in the ground through a frost or two before you pull. The cold turns the starch in it to sugar, and it comes out sweeter than it went in. Twist the tops off, don't wash it, lay it in the coldest corner of the cellar around 32 to 40 degrees, and it'll hold 4-5 months, some of it clean to spring. Store it warm, and it goes woolly and bitter and pithy in the middle. A nickel packet of that seed fed a family through February. Number 24, salsify, the oyster plant. Here's one clean gone from the gardens now. The old folks called it the oyster plant because cooked in a little milk, it tastes near enough of oysters, as close to the sea as anybody up here was getting. It's a long, skinny, cream-colored root, and you grow it like a parsnip. It wants a deep, loose bed a foot down, because if it hits a rock, it forks into a fiddle of little roots you can't do a thing with. You leave it in the ground and dig it all winter. Honest truth, some folks can't taste the oyster in it at all and call it a weedy carrot. But it fed people, and a seed house that used to sell 40 kinds of it now sells none. Number 23, the winter radish. Forget that little red radish you eat in May. It won't keep a week. The winter radish is a different animal. Big as your fist, black-skinned, hard and hot, bred to store. The black Spanish is the old one. You sow it in late summer so it makes its root in the cool of the fall. Dig it before the ground locks up and pack it in the cellar in damp sand or leaves, where it stays hard and juicy 3-4 months. A bite that'll clear your head on a February morning when there's nothing green for 100 miles. Sow it in the heat of June, though, and it bolts straight to seed and goes so hot and woody you can't eat it. It has to make its root going into the cool. Number 22, kohlrabi. A lot of these hollers were settled by Germans, and they brought this one, kohlrabi, a word that just means cabbage turnip, and that's what it looks like. A pale green globe sitting up on top of the ground. You eat the swell stem, peel it, and it's crisp and mild, part apple, part cabbage. Sow it for fall, and it keeps in the cellar a couple of months. The one rule is you pull it while it's young, tennis ball size, because let it get big as a softball and it turns to wood and string and you'll not get a knife through it. A German grandmother on the next ridge grew it every year, and when she passed, there wasn't another one grown in that whole cove. Number 21, leeks, the onion that stands in the snow. Now here's a thing worth knowing. Most everything else on this list you dig in the fall and haul inside. The leek you leave standing right out in the garden and dig it green out of the snow. It's a mild cousin of the onion that never makes a bulb, just a long white shank, and the hard old kinds are tough as boot leather about cold. You sow it in spring, hill dirt up the stem all summer to blanch that shank long and tender, and then you just leave it. 20 degrees, a foot of snow, don't matter. You scrape down and dig your supper in January with the ground froze around it. The one thing that'll beat you is a wet spot. A leak in low ground that holds water will rot at the root. Put them where the water runs off. That's the ones you dig loose and store. From here, it's the roots that hold in the ground, and the beans and the corn that were the real difference between eating and not. If this is the kind of thing worth keeping, subscribe. I put one of these up every few days. Number 20, multiplier onions. The onion that plants itself. Before there was a seed rack at the store, a mountain woman kept her onions going the way you keep a fire going. You never let it go out. The multiplier onion, some call it the potato onion, doesn't make one big bulb from a seed. You plant one bulb and it splits underground into a nest of 6 or 8, and you eat the big ones and save the little ones back to plant in the fall. Same onions, handed along, year after year. No seed to buy, ever. Ma's onion bed came down from her mother. They braid and hang in the kitchen and keep near all winter. Lose the last of your keeping bulbs to rot, though, and the line's broke. There's no packet to start it back. Number 19, the keeping cabbage, the whole head put down. This isn't kraut, and it isn't a pot of boiled cabbage. This is the whole hard head, kept alive into February. You want a late drumhead kind, dense as a cannonball, not a loose summer cabbage that'll never hold. You grow it into the cool of the fall, so it heads up hard. Then before the ground freezes, you pull the whole plant, roots and all. The old way was to dig a shallow trench, set the heads in it upside down, root up, and cover them with straw and a little dirt. Buried out there, they'll hold crisp for months. Or you hang them by the root in the cellar. Store 'em warm or bruised, though, and one rotten head will slime the whole lot, and you'll smell it before you see it. A pit of cabbage was a green vegetable in the dead of winter, which was near a miracle. Number 18, the turnip, root and top both. The turnip was the poor man's insurance, and it's quick. That's the whole beauty of it. You can sow it so late, 6, 8 weeks before frost, that a family who'd had a crop fail still had time to put in a turnip patch and not starve. You get 2 vegetables off the one seed, the greens, cut for a mess of cooked salad all fall, and the root, dug and cellared for winter. A light frost only makes the root sweeter. Now, this is the crop, not the supper. What Ma did with it in the pot is another video. Sow it too thick and you get all tops and no root. Thin them to a couple inches and let each one make a root the size of a teacup, and a 10-cent row of turnips would carry you a long way into the cold. Number 17, kale. The sweeter it gets, the colder it gets. Kale was a green that wouldn't quit. The dwarf Scotch and the old blue curl kinds will stand right through the winter up here, buried in snow, and come out alive on the other side. And here's what the old folks loved it for. A hard freeze makes it better. Frost on the kale turns it sweet and takes the raw edge off. You don't cut a good mess of it till after the first real cold. So it sat out there all winter, being your salad and your pot greens when there wasn't another leaf of green anywhere. The failure is cutting a whole plant at once. You don't. You strip the lower leaves and leave the top bud growing, and one plant feeds you leaf by leaf for months. Cut the crown out and you've killed it. Number 16, beets. The whole family off one root. The beet earned its keep twice. There's a sweet red root which you grow into the fall and dig before the freeze, and you never cut the root or it bleeds out all its color and sugar. You twist the tops off an inch up. Then it cellars in damp sand or leaves for months, hard and sweet. But the greens off the top of that same beet were a cooked mess of salad all fall. So one seed fed you 2 ways. The failure's in the digging. Bruise a beet or nick it with a fork, and that's where the rot starts in the cellar. You lift 'em gentle, let the skin dry a day, and pack 'em so they're not touching. Number 15, skirret, the sweet root nobody remembers. Here's one I'd bet you've never heard of, and there was a day every garden had it. Skirret. A sweet white root grows in a cluster of fingers off the one crown like a hand, and it was on the table in this country before the potato ever caught on. Boiled and buttered, it's sweeter than a parsnip, almost like a sweet potato, and it's a perennial. You dig the roots you want in the fall and winter and leave the crown, and it comes right back on its own every year. The trouble, and it's likely why it faded, is the roots have a little woody string up the center you've got to work around. And once the potato came along, easy and fat, folks quit fooling with it. The last man on our creek who grew skirret has been gone 40 years, and I've never seen it since. Number 14, the mangle, the great root of the hard year. Now this one folks would laugh at today, and they oughtn't. The mangle wurzel, the stop beet, is a beet gone giant, 10-15 pounds, some big as a nail keg, and Pa grew a whole patch of them for the milk cow to eat through the winter. But when a year went bad and the cellar came up short, the family ate them too. A young one cooked up coarse and sweet, a poor man's beet, and coarse and sweet beats an empty plate every time. They grow enormous with almost no care, store all winter in a pit or the cellar, and one row would keep a cow and something juicy till the grass came back. The failure is eating them big and old. The giants turn woody and are best left for the cow. But a young mongrel got many a family from February to green. From here down, these were the real backbone of a mountain winter. The roots that stayed in the ground, the poison that hid among them, the beans and the bread. This is where survival quits being a word. Number 13, horseradish, the root that dug itself in for good. Horseradish wasn't grown for a meal. It was grown for a jolt. That white root, ground up, would clear your sinuses and cut the fat on a piece of winter pork. You plant a piece of root in the spring, and it makes a big taproot you can dig any time the ground's not locked. Fall, winter, early spring, right on through. The bite doesn't even wake up till you grate it and the air hits it, and it's fiercest fresh. So you dug it the day you wanted it. Here's the only warning, and it's real. Horseradish will take a garden. Every scrap of root left in the ground grows a new plant, and inside 3 years it'll own a whole corner, and you'll never be shut of it. You give it a bed by itself, off at the edge, and keep it there. Number 12, the parsnip, sweet as candy with a cousin that kills. Save the best root for the worst weather. The parsnip is a long white root most folks have plumb forgotten, and it's the sweetest thing that comes out of a winter garden. But there's more to say about it than any plant on this list, so hear me all the way through. You sow it in spring, and it takes its slow time, and then it just sets in a row all summer looking like nothing. You leave it right through fall, right through the first hard freezers, and that is the whole secret. The parsnip has to be froze in the ground to turn sweet. The cold changes the starch in that root to sugar, and a parsnip dug in January after a month of hard freezers is sweeter than a carrot, near like candy. You dig 'em as you need 'em, straight out of the froze row. Now here's where I have to stop and be dead serious with you, because this is the one on the list that can kill. 2 things. First, the tops. A parsnip's own leaves and sap can burn your skin. Handle the greens on a sunny day with bare wet arms, and you can raise a blister and a brown stain that lasts for months. Wear your sleeves. Second, and this is the deadly one, the parsnip is in the carrot family, and it has wild cousins in that family that are the most poisonous plants on this continent: water hemlock and poison hemlock. They grow wild in the same wet ditches and fence rows. They have that same lacy leaf and white flower, and water hemlock will kill a grown man inside a couple of hours. You eat the parsnip you planted from seed in your own row. You never, ever dig a wild one. Get that straight, and it's the finest sweet the winter gives you. Get it wrong, and it's the last thing you dig. Number 11, the groundnut, the bean that grew a potato. This one's half garden, half woods. The groundnut, some called it the hog peanut, is a wild bean vine that grows a string of little tubers down in the ground like beads on a chain, and each one's a starchy nugget you dig, boil, and eat like a little potato. The Cherokee ate it long before anybody planted a garden up here, and hard-up families kept a patch going at the fence row where the vine could climb. It's got more protein in it than a real potato, which is a rare thing in something you dig. The catch is patience. The tubers are small. It takes 2 or 3 years for a patch to make digging worthwhile, and a few folks get an itch from handling them. so the old rule was cook 'em well and don't gorge the first time. But a fence row of ground nuts was free winter food that came back every year with no plowing at all. Number 10, the keeping pumpkin, the one that sat on the shelf till spring. Not every pumpkin's a keeper, and that's the thing folks miss now. The big, soft jack-o'-lantern kind rots by Thanksgiving. The old field pumpkin and the little sugar pie were bred hard-shelled to keep, set up on a board in a cool, dry room, not the damp cellar, and they'd hold 3-4 months, sound to the middle. The whole trick is the cure. Leave a good stem handle on and let 'em set in the sun a week or two till the shell goes hard as a gourd. Cut the stem off flush or bruise the shell, and you've opened the door for rot. That one goes soft and takes its neighbors with it. A shelf of pumpkins was pie and stock feed and seed all winter, off ground you were already growing corn on. Number 9, corn salad, the little green that came up in the cold. Here's a forgotten one. Corn salad, some called it fettucus or lamb's lettuce, a little low rosette of mild green leaves, and it had one gift that made it precious. It grew in the cold nobody else would grow in. You sow it in the fall, and while everything else is dying back, it comes up green. And it'll stand under the snow to be picked in the dead of winter when a fresh anything was worth its weight. The only way to lose it is to sow it in warm weather where it bolts and goes bitter. It's a cold weather plant to its bones, and you plant it going into the cold, never out of it. Once it's in a garden, it'll seed itself down and come back every fall. Number 8, the winter squash, the Hubbard you took an axe to. If the pumpkin was the easy keeper, the hard-shelled winter squash was the champion of the whole cellar. And the king of them was the Hubbard, a great blue-gray thing, 10, 15, 20 pounds, with a shell so hard the old joke was you dropped it on the porch to open it or took an axe to it. That shell is the whole point. It's armor, and a well-cured Hubbard on a cool shelf will keep 6 months, deep into spring, longer than near anything else you grow. The flesh is thick, dry, and sweet, and one squash was food enough. The cut end would even dry over and keep a while more. The rule is absolute. Keep the stem on, cure it hard, store it cool and dry, never the damp cellar. Wet is what beats a squash. Set it on a cold, damp floor and it'll rot from the bottom where you can't see. The last 7 are the ones a mountain family truly could not have wintered without. The beans, the nuts, the bread corn, and at the end, the one squash worth a whole video by itself. Number 7, collards, the plant that fed you out of the snow. Down in the lower mountains and all through the south, the collard was the winter green. A loose blue-green cabbage that never makes a head, just keeps throwing big flat leaves up a stalk, and it stands through hard freezes and feeds you all winter. Like its cousin the kale, a frost only sweetens it, and the old saying was, you didn't cut collards till after the first frost had hit them. There's an old mountain kind, the cabbage collard, a little more tender, that folks passed the seed of house to house because you couldn't buy it. You pick from the bottom up, leaf by leaf, and leave the growing top. And one row is a green vegetable on the table in January when the ground's white. Cut the whole plant down and you've ended it. Take the lower leaves and let it keep climbing. Number 6, the cornfield pea, the vine that made its own dinner. The cornfield pea, the crowder, the whippoorwill, the old field peas, cousins to the black-eyed pea, was the crop for the hardest ground and the hottest, driest end of summer, when a regular bean would burn up and quit. This pea loved the heat. It climbed the corn stalks after you'd laid the corn by, and it made a pod of little peas you let dry right on the vine. Then you picked the dry pods, shelled them, and you had bags of hard little peas that kept in a sack for a year and cooked into supper with a piece of hog jowl. That's meat you grew on a vine, on ground too poor and dry for much else. The failure is leaving the dry pods out in a wet fall. They'll mold in the pod. Pick 'em when they rattle dry and get 'em under a roof. Number 5, the peanut, the goober patch. Folks forget the mountains grew their own peanuts. The goober, we called it, and a family with a warm sandy patch put in a row every year. It's the strangest crop in the garden. It flowers up top, and then the flower stem bends down and drives itself into the ground, and the peanut makes underground where you can't see a thing happening. You dig the whole plant in the fall before frost, shake the dirt off the nuts hanging on the roots, and hang the bush in a crib to cure a few weeks till the nuts rattle. Then it's roasted goobers by the fire all winter, and boiled green ones in the fall. Fat and protein a child could grow himself. The failure is digging them too soon, before the nuts have filled, or leaving them in wet ground where they'll rot underground and you'll not know till you pull an empty shell. Number 4, mustard greens, the quickest green there is. Mustard greens, the fast, sharp green that filled the gap. When the fall garden was coming on slow and you wanted something green in a hurry, you sowed a broadcast patch of mustard, and in 30-40 days you had a mess of hot, peppery greens off ground that had just quit growing something else. It's the quickest green there is. It takes the cold down into the low 20s, and the bite of it, sharp as horseradish almost, woke up a plate of winter pork and cornbread. You cut it young and cut it often, because let mustard get old and go to bloom, and it turns bitter and stringy and shoots up a yellow flower, and it's done. A single late patch of mustard was a doctor's worth of greens going into winter, off a packet of seed and 6 weeks of cool weather. Number 3, the bread corn, flint and dent, dried on the stalk. Number 3, and this was the true stuff of life up here. Not sweet corn off the cob in July, but the hard field corn, the flint and the dent, grown to dry rock hard and be ground into meal all winter. The old mountain kinds had names like poetry. Hickory King with its big white flat kernels, and Bloody Butcher, dark red as its name. And a family saved its own seed and grew the same corn their people had grown for 100 years. You let it stand and dry right on the stalk till the shuck went papery and the kernel was hard as a bead. Then you shucked it and stored the ears in a corn crib built with gaps in the wall so the air could move through and keep the mold off. All winter you shelled off what you needed, took a turn to the water mill, and came home with meal for the day's bread. 31 years I carried a dinner bucket down into the mine, and there was cornbread in it made from our own corn every single day. That was the bread these mountains ran on. Let it get damp in the crib, though, and the whole crop molds and turns. A wet corn crib was a family's disaster. The corn had to come in dry and stay dry, and on it hung the whole winter. Number 2, the shell bean, the meat that grew on a string. Number 2, not the green bean you snap, and not the leather breeches you string and dry. The dry shell bean, grown clean past eating green, left on the vine till the pod was papery and the beans inside were hard as gravel. That was the poor man's meat, and up here it kept a family alive. The old kinds are near gone. The October bean with its speckled pink, the greasy bean, the cornfield cut short, and every one was seed a family saved and handed down, grown up to corn same as the peas. You let the pods dry brown and brittle on the vine, pulled a whole vine before a wet spell, and shelled the beans out into a crock. Dry beans in a dry crock keep a year, 2 years. A sack of 'em was protein in the cupboard against any winter that came. Shell 'em damp or store 'em damp and they'll mold or the weevil gets in. You dry 'em hard, and some folks put a dried hot pepper in the crock to keep the bugs off. A pot of those beans and a pone of cornbread was supper on 1,000 mountain nights, and it kept people strong on almost no money at all. Number 1, the candy roaster, the squash these mountains almost lost. Number 1, if there's one vegetable that belongs to these mountains and to nobody else, it's the candy roaster. A long, blue-tipped, pink-orange squash the Cherokee grew here in the southern mountains long before anybody else came, and they gave the seed to the mountain families, and for 150 years it was the squash. And the name is honest. It's sweet as candy, so sweet the old folks used it for pie in place of a pumpkin, and you couldn't tell the difference. Sweet enough it hardly needed the sugar you couldn't afford anyhow. They grow long as your arm, 30, 40 pounds, and that hard shell means one cured and set on a shelf will keep the better part of the winter. One squash was a month of suppers. Ma grew candy roasters up the back fence every year, and come January, she'd bring one in off the shelf and there'd be pie and squash fried in a little grease and squash in the cornbread out of one blue-gray thing that grew all summer without a lick of trouble. And here's the part that's the reason for this whole list. That squash near about died out. When the seed catalogs quit carrying the old kinds, when folks moved off the ridges and quit gardening, the candy roaster came within a hair of being gone for good, down to a few old families and a handful of seed savers holding a paper sack of seed in a drawer. Ma's was the last one grown on our ridge, and when she got too old to garden, that was the end of it there. It's back now, a little, because a few stubborn people wouldn't let it die. That's the thing about a vegetable. It's not just food. It's a living seed that 150 years of people kept alive one summer at a time, handed hand to hand, and it dies the year the last person quits growing it. This one came that close. Here's my challenge. Pick one, just one. Sow a short row of turnips or mustard this fall and eat something green out of the cold. Leave 3 parsnips in the ground past the first hard freeze and dig 'em sweet in January, and never ever dig a wild one. Or write off for a paper of seed of one old kind, a candy roaster, an October bean, a multiplier onion, and grow the thing your great-grandparents grew, and save the seed back, and keep it alive one more year. And tell me down below, what did your people grow to get through the winter? What was in your grandmother's cellar, and what county was she in? Somebody out there is the last one growing a bean nobody else has, and I'd like to know its name before it's gone. Because that's what this is. A garden was a library. 300 years of seed and knowing carried one summer at a time, and it closes one old gardener at a time, one paper sack of seed thrown out at a time. One thing before I go, and I'll only say it the once. Everything I know, everything on this channel, I'm putting in a book. Sourced the way we do it here, every claim with where it comes from, so it's written down and checkable before the last of us takes it into the ground. If you want it, it's at EzraCade.com. That's the only time you'll hear me say it. They knew. Now it's written down.